for use only, then that 3.0, that 0.30 margin should not apply to me. Because now, if a point, 100th of a point is frivolous to deny my production. And if I'm a farmer and I'm just burning 180 acres of this, I don't feel like how you feel.
Or maybe there should be like a threshold for farmers that are doing it that way.
Exactly.
So like maybe if it goes to like 0.4 or something, then it's like, okay, you have to burn it.
Exactly.
But I don't think 0.31,
I think 0.31 is very finicky.
It was finicky almost intentionally though,
Right,
right?
it
So
sounds like.
I think this is a good point. I'm gonna let Dr. Hortley go and then we can transition into Lisa's presentation.
Right,
Because
yeah,
you
okay.
actually have a case.
Maybe Lisa has something.
Well, I just want to say that I work with Alabama hemp farmers, so I'm a medical anthropologist, and I go in the field, and I've worked with 10 farmers, or on 10 farms over the last 2 years, consecutively, so with all of them intertwined. So one of the things the farmers have said that they would like to see, especially now that medical cannabis has become legal in Alabama, is some type of a transition to where if their CBD hemp crop, so because everyone that I know that is farming right now in the state is farming for health and wellness, the CBD. They're not doing it for the textile.
Every single one.
And this is because of the lack of processors and processing availability for the textile industry, which is another thing that's being kind of discussed and worked on. But what they would like to see, they're like, I'm not intentionally trying to get my hemp hot, but if it does go over the 3%, why can't there be some kind of a pipeline connecting it to the medical cannabis side where it could be utilized? So, and not destroyed, not where they lose everything that they put.
Well, real quick, I do want to point out also, so remember in the video at the end, when Dean, the Asian guy, pops in, which is crazy, like, you know his name is not Dean. When he comes on, the first thing that he said, which was very interesting to me, was that this is a globalized economy. And the reality is, for this to be a film that's produced by Patagonia, so at the very beginning, they showed you two words. It said Patagonia Films and it said workwear. Patagonia has a line of clothing called workwear that they're shifting, so their entire production is solely based on industrial hemp. So they're the first major clothing brand that is actively shifting to trying to do all hemp. And one of the things that they've had an issue with doing is supporting farmers in transitioning their operations to just growing hemp because of the legality that you just explained and the lack of support, because it's technically not a commodity crop yet. So if it's not a commodity crop, that's a whole world of banking and insurance that you now don't have access to. Whereas when you're growing soybeans and something happens, you know, you have a flood, insurance kicks in, boom, you get your money. With hemp, if you go hot, there is no insurance for you right now. And that's part of what the State Banking Act was pushing for, was to support financial institutions to feel legislatively supported so that they wouldn't be considered like kingpins, essentially, in the cannabis industry. So there's been a lot of policy that's happening, but of course, when one piece of policy comes on the floor, you know, it has to go back and forth between the parties, and then it gets so convoluted with other things that people are now, you know, it just keeps ending up going back and forth. But once I said all that to say, what was interesting is that Patagonia has now entered itself as kind of like a consultant almost to the market. So they showed us the governor of Colorado. The governor had a special advisor, and they're partnering with Colorado State, which is their extension office, right? That's where their extension goes through. And they brought in this Chinese foreign person who is actively bringing the same technology that is already existing at this point. China is the only place that has this robust industry on lock. So now what we just saw was them saying like, okay, well now we have to bring in somebody from the outside to help us build up our production chain. So that way farmers have the support to diversify.
And I think unfortunately, because of the administration that we're currently under, the progression of that is going to be slowed up. And that's because of the whole theme of making America great again, is to keep the resources here and not to import in, more so to export out. And this becomes an industry, but it's great that Patagonia is incentivizing it for the production of farmers, for the government to see, hey, listen, this is what we can come up of it with, because it makes logical sense. All right, you're telling me if I can't use it for hemp practices, why should I not be able to use it for the psychosocial practices? It didn't make any sense for me to burn this. It was a waste of money.
Oh, for
So,
Yeah.
so, but if you want to make America great again, why punish me when, and instead of incentivizing me, where now you have to go ahead and outsource it from another country? You're forcing me
To import.
to import.
Well, I mean, and they kind of touched on it, and you know, I don't want to take up too much space. I want to step back because I know Lisa, you have to do a presentation. But one of the things that upset me watching this, which we talked about earlier, is they go from policy in the 30s, then they skip to policy in the 60s, and then they skip all the way to 2018.
I see no black people.
Yeah, the only thing they showed black people was doing the work when they talked about Jamestown, Virginia, and that was for 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Right, but
so-
it used to be known as Negro, right? Like that was our plan, right? And so they didn't talk about the criminalization, right? They talked about Nixon, it got rolled, so he literally verbatim, he said somehow it got rolled into marijuana, right? It was a racialized crop. That's how it got rolled into marijuana. And then when you have the cotton industry and the timber industry actively suppressing it because of its ability to do all these things, you start seeing the layers of big agriculture kind of coming together to do what it's always done, especially when it comes down to black and brown people in the space.
So I mean, yeah, you can definitely focus on that as piece too, because when you talk about the forest industry, you talk
Right.
about the lack of the presence or the presence of black people in the forest industry or that agency in particular. But also too, if you want to scale out the economy, we would want to look at this as a commodity instead of just a specialty crop, because of what it can do to leverage out the economies and scales for that product in itself. And the reason why trees can be hard to compete with trees, because trees are our #1 GDP for this country. I mean, really for this hemisphere. The Eastern Hemisphere can't grow trees at the rate that we grow trees in the Western Hemisphere. You know what I'm saying? Canada, South America. So the only other continent that does is Africa. So here it is. How can hemp replace that? So when you talk about the economies and scales, that's going to be the argument. And I get the argument for us a social stance on the racism piece, but they're going to always talk about the money.
I mean, I'm gonna be quiet.
Thank you.
Yeah.